And good Monday afternoon. It is 2 p.m. right on the dot here, November 16th. Mr. Frank Prosnich joins me. And how are you, Frank?
I'm doing just fine, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing all right. And we have a very special guest who's rejoining us. This will be his second appearance here on The Big Show.
All right. There you go.
And he is Dr. Michael Fine.
And kicks off what's really the start of a great series for us, and that's our author series, in which we're going to highlight people who have written nonfiction, have written novels, have written short stories that live in Rhode Island or have some connection to Rhode Island. So it's a terrific way to start. But Dr. Fine also has this incredible background of having been the director of the Department of Health, being a practicing physician, involved in a lot of community health health organizations. And so why don't we start with the back end a little bit, and just get your quick take on where we are with COVID and where we are with these vaccines.
Well, thanks, gentlemen. Nice to see you both. Where we are with COVID is in a bit of a mess at the moment. We look like we are seeing about 1,000 new cases per day just in Rhode Island alone. Something like 170,000 new cases in the United States, with too many hospitalizations and too many deaths. The number of people in the hospital in Rhode Island has doubled in about 2.5 or 3 weeks. And we expect, given the rate of rise in the number of cases, I expect the people in the hospital will double or triple or more over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So we're in for a tough winter. That's the bad news. The good news is that the first two bigger vaccine trials are about a little more than half done. Both are showing very promising results. I don't want to draw any conclusions until the trials themselves are complete, which should be, I think in another 3 or 4 weeks, the trials will be complete. And then when they're complete, obviously then the vaccine needs emergency approval if it's going to get that. And then it needs to get distributed. So the good news is it looks like it's working. The less good news is I think it will take 4 to 6 months before we have enough people vaccinated in Rhode Island to make a difference in terms of how we have to live our lives.
Are there differences? I'm sorry. Are there differences in the vaccines?
There are 2 now. There will be as many as 11. I think there are 5 that are pretty advanced in development. So we may get a bunch of different vaccines, which is probably helpful at the end of the day, because we have 330 million people to vaccinate.
Dr. Fine, last time you joined us, you had mentioned that you believe that we may be wearing masks, social distancing up until 2022. With this news of vaccines, you still think that's still the case?
I do. If we can get, remember, the vaccine trials haven't finished yet. And, everybody's excited, and that's good news, but don't get disappointed if we see a curveball sometime in the next 2 or 3 months. The vaccine is being tested on more people, but it's not been tested on zillions of people. And it's not till you test the vaccine or administer the vaccine to 500,000 people or 1 million people do you really see its impact. So we will see, I suspect, cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a temporary progressive paralysis, and other autoimmune problems that will happen, as happened with any vaccine. And then people will need to take a step back and evaluate how serious those problems are. So I expect this to be a 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back process, sort of sputtering, not like, boom, it's all over. And I don't think it will be done till 2022.
And I imagine that you would advise anybody who has the opportunity to volunteer to participate in any of these types of processes, or in the testing or antibodies, anything like that, you would advise them to participate in it?
Well, I think that is a reasonable civic thing to do. have to take into account your own health a little bit. But if you're otherwise well and, think that your responsibility is to share in this challenge, then please step up and volunteer. We're actively recruiting volunteers for a vaccine trial in the state of Rhode Island. I'm working hard with a bunch of people in Central Falls to make sure that the vaccine volunteers we recruit have that there's diverse representation, so we actually test the vaccine with all communities. And obviously, Newport is important in that process and there are lots of opportunities to volunteer.
I think that Pfizer had said they were testing somewhere around 44,000 people at this point.
And they have to test, both Pfizer and Moderna have to test enough people so that in the control group, the people who don't get vaccinated, there are 162 or 164 positive cases, and they were about halfway there. They're in their 90s of positive cases. That lets them know with some certainty that there are enough people for statistical analysis. So we're a little more than halfway there. And again, I don't want to draw conclusions until the test is done. And even after that test is done, the second test is what's called post-release evaluation, that when we see it administered to 500,000 or a million people instead of 44,000 or even 88,000, we'll see problems that we're not going to see when we're testing it with, 44 or 50 or 80,000 people.
We still see a number of people who are refusing to social distance, refusing to wear masks because they have been cajoled, they have been convinced in their way that this virus isn't what it is made out to be. How do we turn that around, and how much of a problem is it?
I think how much of a problem it is, we will have to wait and see. The more people we get vaccinated and the quicker we get them vaccinated, the quicker we stop the progression of this disease. For people who are skeptical, I'd like to think that they'll look around and see what's happening in our hospitals, and convince themselves. I don't think my father had a saying that he stole from, I think, Mark Twain, but I can't remember who. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I don't think you can force people to believe in this. But some of it, I think they're going to see for themselves when you watch, when the hospitals fill, as I think they will.
Or when somebody close to them contracts the disease and has serious illness. I look at Chris Christie, who had his moment where he changed his position because he suffered from it.
Right. And, I was pleased that he did as well as he did. I thought he had some risk factors that made him, possibly, at risk for more serious disease. We know that about 5 to 10% of people who get the disease will end up in the hospital. Something like a quarter to a third of those are going to die. We want to prevent it if we possibly can.
So, are you speaking, Ryan, or?
So we'll play a little inside baseball here. I'm getting a little bit of echo. That's why you keep seeing your mics mute and off mute, but we're okay. Just wanted to ask Dr. Fine, today the Rhode Island's teachers unions, on behalf of the vast majority of Rhode Island teachers and education support professionals, called today for a holiday pause of in-person learning by November 23rd for K through 12 students, saying that they think this opportunity will permit the Department of Health to catch up on contact tracing, could possibly help with the spread of the virus. Your thoughts on keeping kids in school, bringing them home, this call to action?
I think it's a call. And respectfully to everyone who's involved in thinking about it, I think there's widespread consensus that kids belong in school and we need to educate them in person as much as possible. We don't really know how much the disease spreads in schools. We have some ideas, and the early evidence suggests it's not a huge and it's not a huge risk to the kids. It's a much more substantial risk to the staff, particularly people who are over 50. I think we've got issues because we can't find our way clear to saying, you know, if you're over 50, you shouldn't be in the school, and if you're under 50, you shouldn't. We got ourselves wrapped around the politics of doing that. And yet, I think if we made it so that only people who are under 50 were in schools, it would be safe, reasonably safe for everybody. And it would balance the, you know, the desire to keep people in schools and against the desire to keep everybody safe.
And just reading this quote again, I think their number one thing they're pointing at is contact tracing. That they believe the state is falling behind on contact tracing, and it's becoming unmanageable to keep kids in school and know who to keep in school, out of school. So that seems to be the thing, is the state falling behind on contact tracing.
Ryan, to be honest, I think contact tracing, you know, I think there are great people working on it. I think we have massively under-resourced it. And even so, if you look around the world, there's an emerging consensus that contact tracing is failing for this disease. And so I've said before and will say again that I'm not convinced that either contact tracing or widespread testing is the way out of this. That at this point, we need to take our public health workforce and devote that workforce to population, to sort of population management, making sure everybody wears masks, making sure everybody who gets symptoms is in isolation, real isolation, in an isolation hospital. They're doing a bunch of other things that they can't do because they're doing contact tracing and testing. And, you know, when you really look at the data, I don't think contact tracing or testing is a strategy that has helped us control disease. That's not a popular perspective, but it's one that's emerging among my colleagues in the country.
We're coming up on Thanksgiving, one of the holidays that draws in bigger crowds for families and friends. Do you expect that following Thanksgiving, we're going to have another spike?
Yep. Well, I think we are beyond another spike at this point. What I'm expecting, unfortunately, is what might be called exponential growth, where the number of cases just keeps going up and up until we have got everybody infected pretty much, until we get to what's called herd immunity. I think that's the moment that we're in, and I think Thanksgiving is going to accelerate it. This is a year to stay home. I think the AAA has suggested that they expect travel to drop by 10% for Thanksgiving. I'd rather see it drop by 100% this year.
You mentioned it's a good year to stay home. Probably stay home and read a book. How's that for a segue,
yeah.
Frank?
Why don't we rephrase that? Stay at home and read one of Dr. Fine's books.
That would even be better.
So this is a neat series that we're starting, and we're really thrilled that you're our first person into this series. How many books have you written at this point?
Altogether, I've written 5, or written or co-written 5, but there have been 3 in the last 2 years.
And how many nonfiction? 2 nonfiction?
Of the 5, 3 nonfiction and 2 fiction.
Well, let's and you just published one, correct? It's a series of 10 short stories.
Yep, a book called The Bull and Other Stories. It's a book of 10 short stories.
So let's come back to that for a moment. What's a good, successful doctor doing being a novelist and a short story writer?
Frank, you know, it's sort of the other way around. My original intention was to be a writer. And for a number of reasons, I stopped off and went to medical school as I started to write. I'm actually happiest and I think most effective, more effective as a writer than I am as a doctor.
You've written nonfiction, you've written fiction. Which do you like more, and which satisfies you more? And what do you hope that the reader takes from particularly the nonfiction books?
Well, I actually like writing fiction better. From the nonfiction, I hope people get the notion that we have a healthcare market, not a system. And the way for us to fix this is to build a movement like the civil rights movement or the anti-war movement to help us build a healthcare system that is for people, not for profit. But part of the reason I moved back to fiction was I began to understand that all that wasn't going to happen unless people could imagine another world. And so I wanted to start working with the imagination and helping people imagine what we need to do together, what it's like again, and that's become the focus of my writing, my fiction, and my belief that we have real challenges and opportunities about this, about who we are as a people and how to be one people.
You've written a number of short stories, now one in a compilation of 10 of them, and also a novel that you wrote a couple of years ago, right? Abundance.
Yep, Abundance came out in 2019. This book came out in 2020. So both have occupied a fair amount of time and attention. As you may know, I'm always writing, so I put out a short story a month, one which shows up on rinews.com, and another which will appear every month through a website that I have called www.michaelfinemd.com. If anybody wants to read those short stories, they can go on and get them sent to them for free. And there's also a podcast where I sort of read each story, and then we release that as a podcast.
And I'm going to ask you the very important questions here. Abundance, the Bullet and Other Stories, Healthcare Revolt, The Nature of Health, the Zero-Calorie Diet, or what's that, 5. Where do you want people to go and buy these books for themselves or for their loved ones?
Well, they're all available through Amazon. The Abundance and The Nature of Health are available through the publisher, which is called PM Press. Many of the others are available in many of Rhode Island's bookstores. So, you know, and then through that website, www.michaelfinemd.com, that will take you to the ability to purchase any of those books, to find your way to the podcast, or to get one of the free, to get a free short story every single month.
With your short stories and with the novel, is there a common thread that links those all together?
I think there really is. And I think it's the importance of us being one people. You know, when I think about the risks to this nation, and certainly we've in the past couple of years all experienced a sense of risk to who, you know, when I think about the risks of the pandemic or the risks of conflict with other nations, I think the thing that's most dangerous to us is our division, is that we don't feel quite like one people anymore. We feel pretty split and angry at each other. And you know, that old saying, a house divided against itself can't stand, you know, I think is really true. You know, I'm embarrassed about this pandemic. We got beat on this pandemic. We could have and should have stopped it. This is a cold virus. This is, you know, from a public health perspective, you know, you look at other countries, they did way better than we did. What it exploited was our division. And so, you know, Abundance novel tries to tell the story of us as one people. And the short stories all look at the world from the perspective of many different people. There's a farmer in Tennessee and a homeless person on Kennedy Plaza, and a young man who's an immigrant who is trained as a social worker but is working as an electrician. You know, one after the, all sorts of different people. But they're all stories that see the world from these different perspectives. And the important thing about fiction, about novels and short stories, is when I write, I have to imagine the perspective of somebody else. And when you read, hopefully you see the perspective of somebody who you don't know. And that gives you a sense of connection to that person and the ability to kind of see the world and understand what they might be experiencing. So we don't dismiss each other as, you know, disagreeing and useless. It means that we can use fiction to see the real people we are and understand that every perspective, even the ones I disagree with most intensely, every perspective has a place of meaning and a place of reality where it starts. And my job is to imagine that place.
Dr. Fine, let's say we're going through our old school holiday shopping lists. Can you walk through maybe the books that are available and who they maybe would possibly be a perfect gift for?
Sure. Well, let's start with The Bull, which is available widely, most easily through Amazon, but also through the Stillwater River Press in Pawtucket, or Books on the Square, and a number of others. That's, I think, kind of for everybody. It's a book for people who like to read, who like to see the world in different perspectives, but for somebody who wants to take it in small chunks. You know, you can read a story in 20 minutes or a half hour, you know, and you don't have to sort of make your life. You can read, get another perspective, put the book down, wait a day or two, go to the next story. You know, it's a kind of easy to consume, to take these different perspectives on the world. Abundance, the novel, is also meant for anybody who reads and anybody who thinks and anybody who feels. It's been called a romantic thriller, set half in Rhode Island and half in Liberia. So I think anybody who lives in Rhode Island and knows the blue bug will feel a certain affinity toward it. I'm sorry?
Nibbles Woodaway is his name.
Is his name? I didn't know he had a name.
Yeah, Nibbles Woodaway. Yep.
It's on his birth certificate.
So it's particularly meaningful. You know, I haven't seen the birth, you know, like, I don't know for sure that he's an American. Anyway, I haven't seen his birth certificate. Anyhow,
another birth theory.
I think it has great meaning for Rhode Islanders specifically, but for Americans in general, as we try to figure out how to make sense of, you know, who we are as a people, you know, how we bring into our story the story of people who've been traumatized or have, you know, or come from different communities. It brings all that together into one place, and yet is a story of kind of romance and you know, sort of drama and excitement. So it, you know, I'm told it's a pretty good story. And then Healthcare Revolt, that's available from PM Press, www.pmpress.either.com or .org, I'm not sure. And also Healthcare Revolt is available from PM Press, and is you know, a manifesto about how to fix healthcare in the United States. So that's for anybody who wants to think a little bit differently about how we talk about and think about healthcare, you know, wants to think about what it would like what it would be like for us to have a healthcare system instead of this embarrassing and expensive mess.
What is it that inspires you to write a particular story, and how do you select the core of the story that you're writing?
Frank, I don't think I know how to answer that. You know, when I'm writing stories, I get up in the morning and there's something bothering me. You know, there's something that I haven't figured out yet. And I sit down at the computer and it just, you know, it happens. Sometimes I have a dream and it starts in a dream. And I sometimes I have had lunch with someone and I heard their voice and I want to capture that voice. You know, I hear it in my own brain, you know, as you know, I start to think about where we are and how we are and who we are as a people, and how we could have a better life and how we could be better together, and what the roadblocks to that are. And, you know, a story comes out after a couple of days.
With that thinking, it sounds like you might have a lot of books lined up for the future.
They keep getting written. There will be another book of short stories that I think will likely be called Rhode Island Stories, which are stories all based in Rhode Island, that should be out about this time next year. And I think we'll probably be doing a book of short stories pretty much every year for the next couple of years. You know, these stories, some are set in Rhode Island, some are set elsewhere. But you know, I use stories to explore the world, and I'll continue to do that. I've got 2 novels that are kind of germinating, one set in Tennessee, one set mostly in California. And, you know, hopefully they will find their way to see the light over the next couple of years, and probably a book or two, a nonfiction book or two, a book about substance abuse policy. I'm in the group of people who believe that we should legalize everything, and make sure that people have good access to, I mean, not legalize and just give things out. I think all substances should be prescribed by a doctor and dispensed by a pharmacist, and that people shouldn't go to jail for possession, because all that's done is filled the jails and hasn't changed substance abuse as a disease one bit. So there's a book percolating about that, and then maybe another couple of books, nonfiction books, over the next 3-4 years.
Who's your favorite novelist?
Oh man, you know, I'm still stuck on Tolstoy. I think at the end of the day, on Leo Tolstoy. I've never been able to get myself really unstuck, but there are lots of, you know, I mean, we have a great richness of writing. And I think, Frank, I may have mentioned this to you, I love the short stories of what's called the Yiddish Renaissance. Yeah. Stories that were written in Europe in the 1880s and 1890s, particularly by a writer named I.J. Perez, who, you know, and many other short story writers. We have really a wealth of literature, so I'm reading all the time.
Now, John Cheever is among my favorites, for sure.
With good reason.
Yeah. How do you?
I just want to mention a relatively unknown short story writer named Charles Chestnut, an African-American writer from the 1850s and 60s, who wrote brilliantly and beautifully, about life right before and after the abolition of slavery, and about the inner lives of people who had been slaves and had just become free. Beautiful, beautiful writing, kind of the American Chekhov, and somebody who's not widely enough read.
I always get a sense that people can learn more about a society from the novels particularly historical fiction, but from the novels they read, they get maybe a better picture of what things were really like in terms of the society, as opposed to just a recitation of events.
I think that's absolutely right. You know, I read War and Peace many years ago and learned the history later, informed by that. But I also think I think fiction is kind of opens democracy, because you learn about other times in history, you learn about other people and about other cultures now, and how other people see the world. And you learn about it not sort of intellectually. You feel it, you see it, you taste it. And that's really compelling.
Ryan, other questions you might have?
I think I'm pretty good. I was just going to remind people where people can find Dr. Fine's books, as well as his stories, sign up for his email list, all of that good stuff.
You know, I just want to just throw this out that maybe underscores everything. And this was from Helen Keller, you know, the pioneering advocate for the deaf and blind. She said, "When I hold a beloved book in my hand, my limitations fall from me. My spirit is free." I think that's what books do.
I think you're exactly right. Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you, for doing this show, and for opening the world of books to everyone in Rhode Island and around the country by doing this show.
And thank you. And again, thank you also for your work in healthcare, how important that is as well. And I know Ryan is streaming the where you can get the books at michaelfinemd.com, right? And Amazon.
That's correct.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Fine.
Dr. Fine.
Dr. Fine.
Mr. when he writes, Dr. Fine.
All right. Let's see you soon. All right, Mr. Prosnitz, that is our first one down, and we will keep these going here. We're getting a great response to it, and we're hearing from other authors who want to join us.
Yeah, on Friday, G. Wayne Miller, Providence Journal reporter who is the author of 19 books and has been well recognized, well acclaimed. He'll be with us then. We've also heard from Dr. Barbara Roberts. She was the cardiologist to Raymond Patriarca, and she wrote the book Dr. Broad. We just have to set a date with her. And Bruce De Silva, who Bruce De Silva is a former Journal reporter as well, lives in New Jersey now, had worked for the AP for a while, and did a series of books called the Mulligan series, very well received, award-winning novels that all transpire from this fictional newspaper called the Providence Dispatch. But we'll have Bruce on as well. And his wife is a renowned poet. Maybe we can get her to come on as well.
Excellent. And if you are a Rhode Island author, or if you have a book that is Rhode Island based, we invite you to get in touch. Ryan at WhatsUpNewp.com. We would love to have you on here and talk about it. And I'm already hearing from many other authors, and we will get as many of these booked as possible. I think this is very important to do, not just to highlight these authors, creators, artists, but also whenever you can. I know we mentioned Amazon a couple times today. Whenever you can, try to track it down in a local bookstore. Those mom and pop shops need you more than ever right now.
And there are some beautiful, wonderful bookstores that are scattered throughout Rhode Island that are just great. Some of them have coffee shops. It's just terrific places to be. And so, and they're just fun to go in and explore.
And if you can't get it directly from a bookstore, perhaps you can just get it directly from the author and cut out the middleman. But if you can, shop local, either from the author or from a bookstore. And then if all else fails, certainly you can support these authors by buying it on Amazon. But try to help out two people while you're making the purchase. So that's what I got to say. But people can keep up with our schedule. Our next one right now will be Friday. Who knows? Something could pop up midweek this week. We do chat with a musician on Thursday, which will be an interesting conversation. So we'll keep people posted.
Very good.
All right, Mr. Prosnitz, and we will
Ryan.
chat with you very soon, my friend.
Yep.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz, as well as myself, we want to thank Dr. Michael Fine for joining us today. Again, it is michaelfinemd.com. You could find books, stories, his free story that he was telling you about. You could sign up for his email list and much more. michaelfinemd.com, and some great information right there. Buy a book for somebody you love. Buy a book for a coworker, boss, friend, family, enemy, whoever it may be. Give people the joy of art. michaelfinemd.com. Thanks for watching.